The quiet hum of vacuum cleaners and the faint scent of lemon-scented cleaning products filled the empty hallways of Harrington, Wells & Cohen. It was 9:30 p.m. Long after the prestigious law firm's attorneys and paralegals had departed for their upscale Manhattan apartments or commuter trains to Connecticut's suburbs. The 47th floor office gleamed with polished mahogany, crystal awards, and floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the glittering New York skyline, all meticulously maintained by the night cleaning staff that most daytime employees barely acknowledged. Elena Ramirez moved methodically through the luxurious corner office of Marcus Cohen, the firm's managing partner. At 38, she wore her uniform simple black pants and a blue polo shirt with the Metropolitan Cleaning Services logo with quiet dignity. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and the only personal touch she allowed herself was a small silver pendant, a gift from her grandmother who had raised her after her parents' death. Unlike the other cleaners who worked quickly and mechanically, Elena had a system. She began with the less important areas, saving the desk for last. This way, she could linger over the fascinating legal documents that were often left in neat stacks. Tonight was no different. A complex case file lay open on Marcus Cohen's massive desk, yellow sticky notes protruding from its edges. Elena glanced at her watch. She had perfected her timing over the 5 years she'd worked this shift. 20 minutes to properly clean the office while allowing herself 15 precious minutes to read. The firm's attorneys never noticed that she took slightly longer in their offices than the other cleaners did. They rarely noticed her at all. Carefully, she picked up the document, a brief for a corporate liability case. Her eyes scanned the pages with practiced efficiency, her mind working through the legal arguments presented. Without conscious thought, her forehead wrinkled at a particular passage. "That's not right," she murmured to herself, spotting a flaw in the reasoning. The precedent in Kellerman v. Wright doesn't apply here because of the interstate commerce element. She allowed herself a small luxury, pulling a pencil from her pocket and making a tiny notation in the margin. So small it could be mistaken for a printing error. She'd been unable to resist doing this occasionally over the years, particularly when she spotted something the lawyers had missed. It was her small way of participating in the intellectual work happening in these offices, even if no one would ever know it was her. Elena's fascination with law had begun in tragedy. 15 years earlier, her brother had been wrongfully convicted of a crime he didn't commit. The public defender assigned to his case had been overwhelmed and unprepared. Elena, who had been studying business administration at community college, had thrown herself into learning everything she could about the legal system, spending countless hours at the public library reading case law and legal textbooks. Despite her efforts, her brother had served 7 years before being exonerated. By then, Elena's life had been irreversibly altered. She had dropped out of college to work multiple jobs to help support his children. But her passion for law had not diminished. If anything, it had intensified into a quiet obsession. Every night for the past 5 years, after finishing her 10-hour shift at the law firm, she would return to her small apartment in Queens and study for 3 more hours. She had accumulated a small library of law books, some purchased second-hand, others rescued from the firm's recycling bins when they upgraded their libraries. She followed case law through free legal databases at the public library, and had even taught herself Latin to better understand legal terminology. Elena replaced the document exactly as she had found it and continued her cleaning routine. As she emptied the waste paper basket, she noticed a crumpled yellow legal pad. Normally, she would simply dispose of it, but a phrase caught her eye. Henderson merger liability issue unresolved. The Henderson case had been the talk of the office for weeks. Even the cleaning staff had heard about it. A multi-billion-dollar merger that was stalling on some complicated liability questions. Elena smoothed out the paper and quickly scanned the hastily written notes. She recognized Marcus Cohen's handwriting from the many documents she had studied over the years. The problem was immediately clear to her. The firm was approaching the liability issue from the wrong angle. There was a recent Supreme Court decision that would provide the perfect precedent, but it seemed they hadn't connected it to this situation. Elena hesitated, pencil in hand. She had never done more than make tiny notations before, but this was different, a major oversight that could cost the firm the case. Before she could reconsider, she flipped the legal pad to a clean page and began writing. Her handwriting was neat and precise as she outlined the relevant case law and how it applied to the Henderson merger. She worked quickly, distilling complex legal concepts into clear, concise language. When she finished, she carefully tore off the page and placed it in the middle of the desk, weighting it down with a small crystal paperweight. Elena knew it was risky. Someone might recognize that the handwriting wasn't Marcus Cohen's, but something told her it was a risk worth taking. Worst case scenario, the note would be thrown away. Best case, it might actually help. She finished cleaning the office and moved on, her heart beating a little faster than usual, as she vacuumed the hallways. She wondered if she had crossed a line she shouldn't have. But the thought was quickly replaced by the mental challenge of another legal puzzle as she entered the next office and spotted new case files on the desk. Marcus Cohen arrived at his office at 6:30 a.m. the next morning, earlier than usual. The Henderson merger was giving him headaches literally and figuratively. At 53, he had handled hundreds of high-profile cases, but this one had unique complications that were keeping him awake at night. The clients were getting impatient, and the opposing counsel seemed to have found a legal angle he couldn't quite counter. He set his leather briefcase on the credenza and hung his bespoke suit jacket on the coat rack before noticing the single sheet of paper in the center of his otherwise immaculate desk. Frowning, he picked it up. The handwriting wasn't familiar, certainly not his own or his assistant's. As he read, his frown deepened, then gradually transformed into an expression of surprise. The note outlined a legal approach he hadn't considered, citing a recent Supreme Court decision that could be applied to the Henderson case in a novel way. The reasoning was sound, the language precise. It was, in a word, brilliant. Marcus sat down heavily in his chair, rereading the mysterious note. Who had left this? It had to be someone in the firm, but who? The analysis was too sophisticated for a paralegal. Yet he couldn't imagine any of the junior associates being this insightful without immediately claiming credit. And none of the partners would have left such a note anonymously. He pressed the intercom button on his phone. "Jennifer, could you come in here, please?" A moment later, his executive assistant appeared, tablet in hand. "Yes, Mr. Cohen?" He held up the paper. "Did you see who left this on my desk?" Jennifer adjusted her glasses and shook her head. "No, sir. It wasn't there when I left last night. Security would have been the only ones here, and the cleaning staff." "The cleaning staff," Marcus repeated thoughtfully. "Do they have access to my office?" "Of course," Jennifer replied. "They clean every office nightly." "Is there a problem?" Marcus shook his head. "No, not at all. Actually, quite the opposite." "Thank you, Jennifer." After she left, Marcus studied the note again. The idea that a member of the cleaning staff could have produced this level of legal analysis seemed absurd. Yet the note had appeared overnight when only they had access. Perhaps it had been misplaced by someone earlier, and then found and placed on his desk by the cleaners. Regardless of its origin, the analysis was too good to ignore. He picked up his phone again. "Jennifer, please gather the Henderson team in the main conference room in 30 minutes. And get me the full text of Westmoreland v. Pinnacle Insurance. I need to verify something." 3 evenings later, Elena entered Marcus Cohen's office with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. She had heard nothing about her note and had begun to believe it had been discarded without consideration. She glanced at his desk, looking for any sign of the Henderson case files. Instead, she found something unexpected, a single sheet of paper in the center of the desk with a paperweight holding it down. The heading read D, "To the person who left the note about the Henderson merger." Elena's heart raced as she picked it up. The message was brief. "Your legal analysis was remarkably insightful and may have saved our case. If you are willing to identify yourself, I would like to discuss your interest in corporate law. Leave your response under this paperweight. Marcus Cohen." Elena stood frozen, the note trembling slightly in her hand. This was something she had never anticipated: acknowledgement, and what appeared to be an invitation to reveal herself. Her mind raced with possibilities and consequences. If she identified herself a cleaning woman with no formal legal education, would she be dismissed as a fraud? Would she lose her job for tampering with documents? Or was this the opportunity she had never dared to dream of? She placed the note back on the desk and began her cleaning routine, her thoughts in turmoil. As she worked, she considered her options. She could ignore the note and continue as before. She could fabricate a story about finding the note elsewhere and merely delivering it. Or she could tell the truth. When she finished cleaning, Elena sat down at Marcus Cohen's desk, something she had never done before, and pulled out her pencil. On the same paper, beneath his message, she wrote, "My name is Elena Ramirez. I clean your office every night from 9:30 to 10:05 p.m. I have no formal legal education but have studied independently for 15 years. The Henderson analysis came from recognizing the parallels between Westmoreland and the interstate commerce complications in your case. I apologize for the presumption of leaving the note. If you wish to speak with me, I will be cleaning this floor tomorrow night." She placed the note back under the paperweight, finished her shift, and left the building with her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The next evening, Elena approached her cleaning cart with unusual trepidation. Word had spread among the cleaning staff that something strange was happening. The supervisor had informed her that she was to report to the main conference room on the 47th floor at precisely 9:30 p.m., instead of beginning her regular cleaning routine. "Did I do something wrong?" she had asked, trying to keep her voice casual. "Don't think so." The supervisor had replied with a shrug. Message came from the top floor. "Just be on time." Now, as she rode the elevator up, Elena smoothed her uniform and touched her grandmother's pendant for reassurance. Whatever happened, she had been true to herself. If she was about to be reprimanded or even fired, she would face it with dignity. The elevator doors opened directly into the reception area of the 47th floor. Elena pushed her cart out and made her way to the main conference room, an impressive space she had cleaned hundreds of times, with its 20-foot mahogany table and wall of windows overlooking Manhattan. She knocked hesitantly on the partially open door. "Come in," called a voice she recognized as Marcus Cohen's. Taking a deep breath, Elena pushed the door open. She expected to find the managing partner alone, perhaps with HR personnel if this was a disciplinary meeting. Instead, she found 4 people seated at the massive table, legal pads and laptops open before them. Marcus Cohen stood as she entered. In person during business hours, she had only glimpsed him from a distance. Up close, he cut an imposing figure in his perfectly tailored suit, silver hair adding to his distinguished appearance. "Ms. Ramirez?" he asked, as though it was clearly not really a question. Elena nodded, suddenly very conscious of her cleaning uniform and practical shoes. "Please join us," he said, gesturing to an empty chair at the table. Elena hesitated. "Sir, I'm in my work uniform and—" "We're not concerned with your attire, Ms. Ramirez," Marcus interrupted smoothly. "We're interested in your mind." Still uncertain, Elena moved to the indicated chair. As she sat, Marcus introduced the others: James Harrington, one of the founding partners, Sophia Chen, head of the corporate law division, and Daniel Wright, the firm's most promising young partner. "Ms. Ramirez," Marcus began, "your note on the Henderson case was unexpected. We've been working on this merger for months, and you identified an approach none of us had considered." Elena's hands twisted nervously in her lap. "I apologize for overstepping, sir. I sometimes read the documents while I clean. I have an interest in law." James Harrington, a man in his 60s with bushy eyebrows and an intimidating reputation, leaned forward. "An interest. Ms. Ramirez, the analysis you provided shows more than a casual interest. It demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of corporate liability precedents and their applications." Sophia Chen, elegant in a charcoal suit, her dark hair in a sleek bob, studied Elena with calculating eyes. "Our Mr. Cohen tells us you have no formal legal education, is that correct?" "Yes, ma'am," Elena replied. "I've studied independently. My brother was wrongfully convicted years ago, and I began learning about law to help him. After that, I just never stopped." "Self-taught," Daniel Wright said, skepticism evident in his tone. At 35, he was the youngest partner in the firm's history, with degrees from Harvard and Yale. "That's unusual." Marcus Cohen tapped a folder in front of him. "We've done some checking, Ms. Ramirez. You've been with the cleaning service for 5 years, always assigned to our floors. Before that, you worked multiple jobs while raising your niece and nephew after your brother's incarceration. No college degree, though you did complete some coursework at Queens Community College." Elena felt a flush of embarrassment at having her life laid out so clinically. "That's correct. What none of that explains," Marcus continued, "is how you develop the legal acumen displayed in your analysis. So I'm going to ask you directly, did someone help you with this? Are you perhaps working with one of our competitors?" The implication stung, but Elena understood their suspicion. "No, sir. I wrote that analysis myself, based solely on my own understanding. I've been reading legal texts and following case law for 15 years. I spend 3 hours every night studying after my shift ends." Daniel Wright scoffed slightly. "Reading random legal texts doesn't qualify someone to practice law or provide counsel." Elena met his gaze directly. "I don't practice law, Mr. Wright. I'm well aware that would be illegal without proper credentials. I simply notice things sometimes, patterns and connections. The Henderson case reminded me of Westmoreland because of the interstate commerce elements and the subsidiary liability questions." Marcus Cohen leaned back in his chair, studying her. "To test your understanding, Ms. Ramirez, I'd like to pose a hypothetical situation to you." For the next 20 minutes, Marcus outlined a complex legal scenario involving corporate merger complications. Elena listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions that surprised the attorneys with their precision. When Marcus finished, Elena took a moment to organize her thoughts before responding. She outlined a potential approach, citing relevant case law and identifying potential counterarguments. The room fell silent as she finished. James Harrington cleared his throat. "That was remarkably thorough." Sophia Chen was making notes, her expression thoughtful. Your analysis is sound, though I would have approached the contractual elements differently. Daniel Wright remained silent, his earlier skepticism now mixed with confusion. Marcus Cohen smiled for the first time. It seems, Ms. Ramirez, that you have an extraordinary legal mind, which leads us to the question of why we're all here tonight. He glanced at his colleagues, who nodded their agreement. We would like to offer you a position. Elena's eyes widened. A position? As what? I don't have a degree or, as a legal analyst, to start, Marcus explained. Working directly with our corporate team on the Henderson case and others, the position would come with a significant increase in salary and benefits, as well as tuition assistance should you wish to formalize your education. But, Daniel interjected, there would be conditions. You would need to sign confidentiality agreements. You would no longer be cleaning our offices. And you would need to understand that without proper credentials, there are limitations to your role. Elena felt dizzy with the sudden shift in her fortunes. I don't understand. Why would you offer me this opportunity? James Harrington chuckled. Ramirez, do you know how much we bill clients per hour for our services? She shook her head. The firm's partners bill between $900 and $1,200 per hour, he said. We charge those rates because we provide exceptional legal minds, and regardless of your background or credentials, you have demonstrated that you possess such a mind. Talent is rare, Marcus added. When we find it, we cultivate it. We can teach protocols and procedures, but we can't teach the kind of insight you've displayed. Sophia Chen slid a folder across the table. These documents outline the position, compensation, and expectations. Take them home, review them, and let us know your decision by the end of the week. Elena stared at the folder, barely able to comprehend the opportunity being presented. Thank you. I will. As the meeting concluded and Elena stood to leave, Daniel Wright approached her. His expression was less hostile than before, but still guarded. Ms. Ramirez, he said quietly, I think you should know that not everyone will be as accepting of your unusual background as the partners appear to be. The legal world values credentials and pedigree. You'll face skepticism and possibly worse. Elena met his gaze. Mr. Wright, I've spent my adult life being invisible to people in suits who pass me in hallways without a glance. Skepticism doesn't frighten me. Elena arrived for her first day as a legal analyst at Harrington, Wells and Cohen feeling like an imposter. The firm had moved with surprising speed, arranging for her release from the cleaning service contract and preparing an office for her, not a corner office with a view, but a respectable space with actual walls rather than a cubicle. She had spent her savings on 3 modest but professional outfits, following Sophia Chen's advice on appropriate attire. Today she wore a simple navy pantsuit with low heels and minimal jewelry, just her grandmother's pendant and small silver earrings. Her hair was styled more carefully than usual, and she had applied light makeup. The transformation was significant, but she still felt conspicuous as she rode the elevator up to the 47th floor. Jennifer, Marcus Cohen's executive assistant, met her at the elevator. Good morning, Ms. Ramirez. I'll show you to your office and help you get settled. Elena followed her through the familiar corridors, now seeing them from a completely different perspective. The morning bustle of a prestigious law firm was a stark contrast to the quiet emptiness she was accustomed to during her night shifts. Junior associates hurried past with coffee and documents, paralegals conferred in low voices, and the phones rang continuously at the reception desk. Her office was small but well appointed, with a computer phone and basic law references already arranged on the bookshelves. A stack of files sat on the desk with a note from Marcus Cohen, Henderson Materials meeting at 1100. MC. Jennifer helped her with the computer login and phone system, then handed her an ID badge and a firm directory. Mr. Cohen asked me to make sure you have everything you need. Is there anything else I can help with? Elena looked around, still trying to absorb the reality of her new position. No, thank you. This is more than I expected. After Jennifer left, Elena sat at her desk, allowing herself a moment to acknowledge the surreal nature of her situation. A week ago, she had been emptying the trash cans in this very office, so now she was occupying it. She opened the Henderson files and began reviewing them in detail, making notes in a legal pad with the firm's letterhead. The familiar act of analyzing legal documents helped calm her nerves. This at least was something she knew how to do. At 10:55, she gathered her notes and the files and headed to the conference room for the meeting. As she walked, she noticed the curious glances from staff and attorneys. Word had clearly spread about the cleaning woman who had been mysteriously elevated to a professional position. The conference room was already half full when she arrived. Marcus Cohen nodded at her from the head of the table. Sophia Chen gave her a small, encouraging smile. The others, junior partners and associates working on the Henderson case, watched her with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright skepticism. One young woman with sleek blonde hair and a designer suit whispered to her neighbor as Elena took a seat. The man, whom Elena recognized as Bradley Wilson, a third-year associate from Princeton, smirked in response. Marcus called the meeting to order. For those who haven't met her yet, this is Elena Ramirez, our newest legal analyst. She's joining the Henderson team and will be focused on the liability issues we've been struggling with. Bradley Wilson cleared his throat. Excuse me, Mr. Cohen, but I'm not familiar with Ms. Ramirez's background. Which firm was she with previously? The question was clearly designed to highlight her lack of credentials. Elena felt her face warm but maintained her composure. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Ms. Ramirez comes to us through an unconventional path, Mr. Wilson. She has extensive self-directed study in corporate law and has demonstrated exceptional analytical skills. That's all you need to know for now. The blonde woman, Alexandra Pierce, according to her nameplate, exchanged another glance with Bradley. Self-directed study. She repeated quietly, but just loud enough to be heard. How? Interesting. Moving on, Marcus said firmly, we need to address the liability complications before the meeting with Henderson's board next week. Ms. Ramirez, would you share your thoughts on the Westmoreland connection you identified? All eyes turned to Elena. This was the moment that would either establish her credibility or confirm their doubts. She took a deep breath and began to speak, outlining the parallels she had found between the current case and the Supreme Court decision. As she spoke, she noticed the expressions around the table gradually shifting. Bradley and Alexandra continued to look skeptical, but others leaned forward with increasing interest. Sophia Chen nodded occasionally, making notes. When Elena finished, there was a moment of silence before Marcus spoke. Thank you, Ms. Ramirez. That's precisely the approach we want to develop. James, can your team pull together the relevant precedents Elena has identified? Sophia, I'd like you to work with Ms. Ramirez on drafting the argument. The meeting continued, with various team members reporting on other aspects of the case. Elena made careful notes, occasionally asking questions that demonstrated her grasp of the issues. By the end of the hour, the outright skepticism had somewhat diminished, though she could tell that many still reserved judgment. As they were gathering their materials to leave, Alexandra Pierce approached Elena. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. That was quite an impressive display for someone without formal training. I'm curious, where did you work before joining us? Your accent suggests you're not from New York originally. The question was posed innocently enough, but Elena understood it for what it was, an attempt to establish her as an outsider. I was born in New Mexico, she answered honestly. I've been in New York for 20 years. And before joining our firm, Alexandra pressed, where did you practice? Before Elena could respond, Sophia Chen intervened smoothly. Ms. Ramirez hasn't practiced law previously, Alexandra. She's been analyzing our cases quietly for years while working in a different capacity. Marcus recognized her talent and brought her onto the team officially. She turned to Elena. Come with, please, we need to discuss the brief. As they walked away, Sophia spoke quietly. Alexandra Pierce's third-generation legal royalty. Her grandfather argued before the Supreme Court. Her father is a federal judge, and she expects to make partner before she's 35. She won't be the only one questioning your presence here. Elena nodded. I understand. I don't expect it to be easy. Good, Sophia replied, because it won't be. But from what I've seen so far, you might just be worth the disruption you're causing. Over the next few weeks, Elena settled into a routine at the firm. She arrived early each day, using the quiet morning hours to study and prepare. She worked primarily with the Henderson team, but was occasionally asked to review other corporate cases when her unique perspective might be valuable. The reactions to her presence remained mixed. Some attorneys, particularly those who had witnessed her analytical abilities firsthand, began to treat her with grudging respect. Others, like Alexandra Pierce and Bradley Wilson, maintained a cool distance, occasionally making comments just within her hearing about proper qualifications and standards of the profession. The support staff secretaries, paralegals, and administrative assistants were generally more welcoming, perhaps because they understood what it meant to be underestimated. Jennifer, in particular, became a valuable ally, often sharing office dynamics and firm protocols that Elena would have had no way of knowing. One Tuesday afternoon, Elena was deep in research when there was a knock at her office door. She looked up to find Daniel Wright standing in the doorway, a file in his hand. Do you have a moment, Ms. Ramirez? He asked, his tone businesslike. Of course, Mr. Right. She straightened in her chair, curious about this unexpected visit. Though Daniel was part of the Henderson team, he had maintained a professional distance from her since her arrival. He closed the door behind him and took a seat across from her desk. "I've been reviewing your contributions to the Henderson brief," he said without preamble. "Your analysis of the Westmoreland precedent is sound, but I noticed an issue with how you've applied it to the subsidiary question." Elena felt a flicker of anxiety. Had she made a significant error? What issue? Daniel opened the file and pointed to a section of her draft. "You've cited the majority opinion, which does support your argument. But if you look at Justice Alito's concurrence, he specifically addresses situations like Henderson's where the parent company maintained separate boards. That creates a vulnerability in our position." Elena considered this, then nodded slowly. "You're right, I missed that nuance." She made a note on her legal pad. "Thank you for pointing it out. I'll revise the section." Daniel seemed surprised by her response. He had clearly expected defensiveness or excuses. "You're welcome," he said after a moment. Elena looked up at him. "Right, I'm well aware of my limitations. I'm still learning, and I value correction when it's warranted." He studied her for a moment, then closed the file. Most associates with formal education would have argued the point or tried to justify their approach. "I'm not here to protect my ego," Elena replied simply. "I'm here to learn and to contribute. If I'm wrong about something, I want to know it." A hint of a smile crossed his face for the first time. "That's refreshing." He hesitated, then added, "The Henderson brief is good work. The approach is unorthodox, but it might just work." Coming from Daniel Wright, who had been openly skeptical of her abilities, this was significant praise. "Thank you." He stood to leave but paused at the door. "The firm's library stays open until 10 p.m. If you're interested in reviewing Justice Alito's other writings on corporate veil issues, there's a collection of his opinions on the north wall. They might be useful for the Henderson case." It was the first time he had offered any sort of guidance or assistance. "I'll look into that. Thank you." After he left, Elena made a note to visit the library that evening. The interaction left her thoughtful. Perhaps not everyone at the firm was as rigidly opposed to her presence as she had assumed. 3 days later, Elena was working late in the firm's impressive law library. The space occupied the entire 46th floor, row upon row of legal volumes, comfortable reading areas, and computer stations for digital research. At nearly 9 p.m., it was mostly empty except for a few dedicated associates and paralegals. Elena had become a regular evening presence in the library, often staying until closing time. Tonight, she was reviewing corporate veil cases as Daniel had suggested, making detailed notes on how Justice Alito's reasoning might apply to the Henderson situation. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't notice Bradley Wilson approaching until he spoke. "Burning the midnight oil, Ramirez." His tone was casual, but there was an underlying edge to it. Elena looked up from her notes. "Just doing some research." Bradley glanced at the volume spread across her table. "Alito's corporate veil opinions. Light reading. Mr. Wright suggested I review them for the Henderson case." Bradley raised an eyebrow. "Wright's giving you research tips now. Interesting. He must be feeling charitable." Elena kept her expression neutral. "Was there something you needed, Mr. Wilson?" "Just curious," he said, taking a seat across from her uninvited. "The firm doesn't usually hire analysts without formal credentials. You must have really impressed someone." The implication was clear, and Elena felt a flash of anger that she carefully controlled. "I provided some useful insights on the Henderson case." "So I've heard," Bradley replied. "What I can't figure out is how someone without a law degree could possibly have developed those insights. Unless what, Mr. Wilson?" Elena's voice was steady. He leaned forwards. "Unless you had help, or access to information you shouldn't have had." The accusation hung in the air between them. Elena set her pen down carefully. "I've been studying law independently for 15 years, Mr. Wilson. That's how I developed my understanding. If you have specific concerns about my work, you should take them to Mr. Cohen." Bradley smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, I'm just making conversation, getting to know the newest member of our team. Though I have to wonder how long you'll last once the Henderson case is resolved. These positions tend to be temporary." Before Elena could respond, another voice joined the conversation. "Is there a problem here?" They both looked up to see Sophia Chen standing at the end of the table, her expression coolly professional. Bradley stood quickly. "No problem at all. Just welcoming Ms. Ramirez to the firm culture." Sophia's gaze was skeptical. "I see. Well, I need to speak with Ms. Ramirez about tomorrow's brief, if you don't mind." "Of course." Bradley nodded to both women and walked away, disappearing between the rows of books. Sophia took the seat he had vacated. "I assume that wasn't actually a friendly chat." Elena sighed. "Not exactly. He seems to think my position here is questionable. Bradley Wilson comes from money and privilege," Sophia said matter-of-factly. "Has never had to prove himself the way some of us have." She glanced at the books Elena had been studying. Alito's corporate veil opinions. Elena nodded. Wright suggested them for the Henderson case? Did he now? Sophia looked thoughtful. That's surprising. Daniel doesn't usually go out of his way to help new team members. I think he was just ensuring the brief is thorough, Elena replied. Sophia studied her for a moment. You should know something about Daniel Wright. He was the only partner who voted against hiring you. Elena was surprised by this candid information. Oh, I didn't realize there was a vote. There was. Marcus and James were strongly in favor. I supported them. Daniel argued that bringing in someone without formal credentials would undermine the firm's standards and create problematic precedents. Then why is he helping me now? Sophia smiled slightly. Daniel values results above all else. If your work strengthens our position in the Henderson case, he'll support it regardless of his personal feelings about your background. She gathered her things to leave. One more thing, Elena. Office politics here can be intense. Watch your back with Bradley Wilson and his friends. They see you as competition, and they've had advantages you haven't. But don't let them intimidate you. You earned your place here. After Sophia left, Elena sat for a long moment absorbing this new information. The firm was more complicated than she had realized, with currents of alliance and opposition running beneath the professional surface. She returned to her research with renewed determination. If her work was to be judged, she would ensure it was flawless. She had faced doubt and dismissal before. This was simply a new arena for the same old battle. The Henderson brief was submitted the following week. Elena's analysis formed a significant portion of the liability argument, refined and strengthened by Daniel's insights about Justice Alito's writings. Marcus Cohen personally presented it to the client, returning with news that Henderson's board was pleased with the approach and optimistic about the merger's prospects. For Elena, it was a quiet victory. She had contributed meaningfully to an important case, proving her value to some who had doubted her. But she was far from accepted by everyone at the firm. The day after the submission, Alexandra Pierce cornered her in the break room, where Elena was making a cup of tea. "Congratulations on the Henderson brief," Alexandra said, her voice carrying just enough for others in the room to hear. "Though I'm curious, how did you become so familiar with corporate law without attending law school?" "It's quite unusual." Elena recognized the trap. If she downplayed her knowledge, she would confirm their belief that she was unqualified. If she expressed too much confidence, she would appear arrogant. She opted for simple honesty. "I've been studying independently for many years," she replied. "And I still have much to learn?" Alexandra smiled thinly. "Self-study. How admirable. Though there's really no substitute for a proper legal education, is there? The rigorous training, the Socratic method, the competitive atmosphere that prepares you for courtroom pressure." A few other associates had paused their conversations to listen. Elena felt their eyes on her as Alexandra continued. "I mean, Harvard Law accepts less than 12% of applicants. Yale is even more selective. There's a reason for those standards. Law is complex and demanding. It requires a certain caliber of mind that's identified and cultivated through formal education." The message was clear. Elena didn't belong in their world, regardless of any single contribution she had made. Elena took a sip of her tea before responding. "You're right that formal education has tremendous value. I would have welcomed that opportunity. But access to education isn't equally available to everyone. Sometimes life takes unexpected turns." Alexandra's perfectly arched eyebrows raised slightly. "Yes, well, that's unfortunate. But the firm's standards have always been clear: top law schools, top grades, proper credentials. It's how we maintain our reputation. Standards evolve," Elena replied calmly, "and so do methods of evaluation. The Henderson brief speaks for itself, regardless of how the knowledge behind it was acquired." Before Alexandra could respond, Jennifer appeared in the doorway. "Ms. Ramirez, Mr. Cohen would like to see you in his office." Grateful for the interruption, Elena nodded to Alexandra and left the break room, aware of the whispers that began as soon as she was out of sight. Jennifer gave her a sympathetic look as they walked. "Don't let Alexandra get to you. She treats everyone that way if they didn't summer at the firm during law school." "I'm fine," Elena assured her. "What does Mr. Cohen want to see me about?" "He didn't say, but he just got out of a partnership meeting. He seemed pleased about something." Marcus Cohen was on the phone when Elena entered his office. He gestured for her to take a seat as he finished his call. His office was even more impressive in daylight than it had been during her cleaning shifts: expansive windows showcasing the Manhattan skyline, shelves lined with legal texts and awards, and artwork that Elena suspected was worth more than she had earned in the past decade. "Ms. Ramirez," he said as he hung up. "Thank you for coming so quickly. I have some news about the Henderson merger." "Has something gone wrong?" Elena asked, immediately concerned. Marcus smiled. "Quite the opposite. Henderson's legal team has reviewed our brief and found our approach to the liability issue compelling. They've scheduled a meeting with the merger targets board for next week, and they want you to attend. Elena blinked in surprise. Me? Why would they want me there? Because the approach was yours, Marcus said simply. And they have some specific questions about how the Westmoreland precedent applies to their situation. I'll be leading the meeting, of course, with Sophia and Daniel attending, but your presence has been specifically requested. This was unexpected. Analysts typically worked behind the scenes, not in client meetings. I'm not sure I'm prepared for that level of representation, Elena admitted. Marcus leaned back in his chair. It's unusual, yes, but your understanding of the case is comprehensive, and Henderson was impressed by the brief. This is an opportunity, Ms. Ramirez, a chance to demonstrate your value beyond document analysis. Elena nodded slowly. I understand. I'll prepare thoroughly. Good. Marcus handed her a folder. These are the likely questions they'll raise. Work with Daniel to develop responses. He's skeptical of our approach, but knows the counterarguments better than anyone. The meeting is Tuesday at 2 p.m. at Henderson's headquarters. Business formal attire. As Elena left Marcus's office, the significance of the opportunity sank in. This wasn't just about analyzing documents anymore. She would be representing the firm to a major client. The stakes were higher, and so were the potential consequences of failure. She made her way to Daniel Wright's office, knocking lightly on the open door. He looked up from his computer with a slight frown, which deepened when he saw her. Ms. Ramirez. What can I do for you? Mr. Cohen asked me to work with you on preparing for the Henderson meeting next week, she explained. He said you would help me anticipate counter-arguments to our approach. Daniel's expression shifted to one of surprise. You're attending the Henderson meeting? Apparently they requested my presence. He was silent for a moment, clearly processing this unexpected development. Finally, he gestured to the chair across from his desk. Let's be clear about something, Ms. Ramirez. I still have reservations about your role here, but the Henderson case is important to the firm, and I won't let personal opinions compromise our representation. He opened his calendar on the computer. I can give you 2 hours tomorrow afternoon to review potential challenges to our position. It wasn't exactly a warm invitation, but it was professional. Thank you. I appreciate your time. As she turned to leave, Daniel added, You should know that not everyone is comfortable with your attendance at this meeting. There's been discussion among some of the associates. Elena wasn't surprised. Discussion. I assume you mean objections from Alexandra Pierce and Bradley Wilson. A hint of amusement flickered across Daniel's face. Among others. They feel that client meetings should be handled by attorneys with proper credentials. And what do you think, Mr. Wright? He considered her question with unexpected seriousness. I think results matter more than credentials. If your analysis helps the Henderson merger succeed, that benefits the firm regardless of how you acquired your knowledge. He paused. But I also think systems and standards exist for a reason. The law is complex and consequential. There are ethical considerations that go beyond analytical ability. Elena nodded. I understand that. I respect the profession enough to know what I don't know. I'm not trying to practice law without a license, just offering analysis based on my understanding. Say that you maintain that distinction. Daniel replied. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. My office. The following day's session with Daniel was intense but productive. He played devil's advocate ruthlessly, challenging every aspect of Elena's analysis with counterarguments a skilled opposing counsel might raise. He showed no mercy for logical gaps or imprecise language, forcing her to refine and strengthen her positions. Despite his challenging approach, or perhaps because of it, Elena found herself appreciating Daniel's legal mind. He thought differently than she did, more systematically and with greater attention to procedural nuances, while she tended to see unexpected connections and alternative approaches. Together, they developed a robust defense of the brief strategy that anticipated most potential objections. By the end of their 2-hour session, Daniel seemed marginally less skeptical of her abilities, though still reserved. You understand the concepts, he admitted as they wrapped up. Your approach to Westmoreland is unorthodox but defensible. Coming from Daniel Wright, this was high praise. Thank you. Your insights have strengthened the argument considerably. He gathered his notes. For the meeting, remember that you're there as an analyst, not counsel. If legal advice is solicited, defer to those of us with proper credentials. Your role is to explain the analytical framework, not to advise on actions. I understand the boundaries, Elena assured him. As she was leaving, Daniel added one more thing. Wear something conservative for the meeting. First impressions matter with clients like Henderson. Elena paused at the door, a flash of irritation breaking through her professional demeanor. Mr. Wright, I'm well aware of appropriate business attire. I may not have attended Harvard, but I do understand basic professional standards. For the first time, Daniel looked slightly abashed. Of course. I didn't mean to imply otherwise. The weekend before the Henderson meeting, Elena visited a small tailor shop in her Queens neighborhood. The elderly owner, Mrs. Patel, had been altering Elena's clothes for years and had expressed delight at Elena's career change. A proper suit for a proper job, Mrs. Patel declared, helping Elena into a charcoal gray suit that had been carefully tailored to fit her perfectly. It was more expensive than Elena would normally consider, but this meeting was too important to risk appearing underprepared in any way. You look powerful, Mrs. Patel said approvingly, adjusting the jacket sleeves, like a woman who knows important things. Elena smiled at her reflection. The transformation was remarkable, the simple cleaning woman replaced by someone who looked like she belonged in a corporate boardroom. Thank you for the rush alterations, Mrs. Patel. Pie, for you anything. My daughter at Columbia says lawyers make big money. You save for law school now, yes. Elena had been considering that very question. With her new salary, formal education was finally a financial possibility, though it would take time. Maybe someday? Not maybe. Definitely, Mrs. Patel insisted, straightening Elena's collar. You are too smart to clean floors forever. I always said so. On Tuesday morning, Elena dressed with special care the charcoal suit, a simple cream blouse, low heels, and her grandmother's pendant tucked discreetly inside her collar. She applied minimal makeup and styled her hair in a neat bun. The woman who looked back at her from the mirror appeared confident and professional, someone clients might trust with their legal concerns. She arrived at the office early to review her notes one final time before the Henderson meeting. Just before noon, Jennifer stopped by her office. Cohen asked me to give you this, she said, handing Elena a small leather portfolio embossed with the firm's logo. Inside was a business card holder containing cards that read Elena Ramirez, legal analyst, Harrington, Wells & Cohen. Seeing her name in the firm's elegant typeface made everything suddenly feel real in a way it hadn't before. Thank you, Jennifer. There's a car service taking you all to Henderson at 1:30, Jennifer added. The partners are meeting in the main reception area. At 1:25, Elena gathered her materials and made her way to reception. Marcus, Sophia, and Daniel were already there, engaged in quiet conversation. All three looked immaculate in expensive suits, exuding the confident professionalism that clients paid premium rates to access. Marcus nodded approvingly at her appearance. Ms. Ramirez, ready for your first client meeting? Yes, sir. I've prepared thoroughly. I'm sure you have, he replied. Remember, let us handle the preliminary discussions and client management. You'll primarily address their technical questions about the Westmoreland application. The car service was a sleek black SUV with leather interiors. As they settled in for the ride to Henderson's Midtown headquarters, Elena couldn't help but reflect on the stark contrast with her usual commute on the crowded subway. This world of car services, tailored suits, and boardroom meetings was entirely new to her. Henderson Global Enterprises occupied 20 floors of a modern glass tower near Grand Central. They were escorted to a conference room on the executive floor where William Henderson himself, along with his general counsel and 3 board members, awaited them. William Henderson was a forceful presence, 60-something, silver-haired, with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to getting his way. He greeted Marcus warmly, nodded to Sophia and Daniel, then turned curious eyes to Elena. And you must be Ms. Ramirez, he said, extending his hand. Your analysis of our liability situation was quite illuminating. Elena shook his hand firmly. Thank you, Mr. Henderson. I'm glad it was helpful. As everyone took their seats around the massive conference table, Elena noticed the general counsel, Robert Jenkins, studying her with particular interest. He was about 50, with thinning hair and shrewd eyes behind rimless glasses. The meeting began with Marcus providing an overview of their approach to the merger's remaining challenges. Sophia then addressed some contractual concerns, and Daniel outlined the regulatory approval process. Throughout these presentations, Elena remained silent, following the firm's protocol for junior team members. Finally, William Henderson turned the discussion to the liability question. Now let's discuss this Westmoreland approach. Ms. Ramirez, I understand this was primarily your insight. Elena glanced briefly at Marcus, who nodded for her to proceed. Yes, Mr. Henderson. While reviewing your situation, I noticed parallels with Westmoreland v. Pinnacle Insurance. Though the industries differ, the interstate commerce elements and the subsidiary relationship structure create a similar legal framework. For the next 20 minutes, Elena outlined her analysis, fielding increasingly technical questions from Henderson and his general counsel. She was careful to frame everything as analysis rather than advice, as Daniel had instructed, but she spoke with quiet confidence about the legal principles involved. Robert Jenkins leaned forward. The Westmoreland decision has generally been applied to insurance cases. What makes you confident it would extend to our manufacturing context? It was a challenging question, but one Elena had prepared for. Justice Alito's concurrence specifically addresses the broader commercial applications, she explained, on page 47 of the decision. He writes that the interstate commerce considerations transcend the specific industry context. Multiple district courts have since cited this language in non-insurance cases. Jenkins looked impressed despite himself. You've read Alito's full concurrence. Several times Elena confirms. It's particularly relevant to Henderson's situation because of his discussion of board independence between parent and subsidiary companies. William Henderson exchanged a glance with his general counsel. Ms. Ramirez, your background is in corporate liability law. Before Elena could respond, Marcus smoothly intervened. Ms. Ramirez is a specialized analyst on our corporate team. Her insights on legal precedents and their applications have been exceptionally valuable. The meeting continued for another hour, with Elena contributing when addressed directly but otherwise allowing the partners to lead the discussion. By the time they concluded, Henderson and his team seemed satisfied with the firm's approach to the merger. As they were gathering their materials to leave, Robert Jenkins approached Elena. Ms. Ramirez, may I ask where you went to law school? Your analysis of Westmoreland was quite thorough. Elena felt Marcus tense slightly beside her. This was the question she had been dreading. I don't have a law degree, Mr. Jenkins. I've studied law independently for many years and recently joined the firm as an analyst. Jenkins's eyebrows rose. Really, that's unexpected. Your understanding of corporate liability principles is remarkably sophisticated for someone without formal training. Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. An unconventional background, he remarked, but impressive results. Sometimes the legal profession needs fresh perspectives. He handed her his card. If you ever decide to pursue formal education, let me know. I serve on the alumni board at Columbia Law. Talented minds should be developed. In the car returning to the firm, Marcus was clearly pleased with the meeting's outcome. Well done, Ms. Ramirez, you handled Jenkins's questions expertly. Henderson seemed satisfied with our approach, Sophia added. I think we've cleared the major hurdle for this merger. Daniel was more reserved, but even he acknowledged her performance. Your preparation was evident. You maintained appropriate boundaries while demonstrating command of the material. For Elena, the meeting had been a revelation. She had held her own in a room full of highly educated professionals, contributing value through her understanding rather than credentials. For the first time, she truly believed she might have a future in this world. News of the successful Henderson meeting spread quickly through the firm. The following day, Elena received congratulatory emails from several attorneys who hadn't previously acknowledged her existence. Jennifer delivered a handwritten note from James Harrington, the founding partner, expressing his appreciation for her contribution. Not everyone was pleased with her growing recognition, however. As Elena was working in the library that evening, Bradley Wilson approached her table, accompanied by Alexandra Pierce and two other associates who had been openly skeptical of Elena's role. The firm's latest star, Bradley said, his tone making the compliment sound like anything but. Quite a performance at Henderson yesterday from what we hear. Elena kept her voice neutral. The meeting went well. The whole team was effective. Alexandra folded her arms. It's interesting that you were included in such a high-profile client meeting. Most analysts work behind the scenes. A mystère. Cohen made that decision. Elena replied simply. Of course he did, Bradley said. Though some of us wonder why, it's unusual for someone without a JD to represent the firm to clients. One of the other associates, Thomas Reynolds, a second year with a perpetual scowl, added, especially when there are qualified associates who weren't included. The implication was clear. They believed Elena was taking opportunities that should have gone to them. I didn't ask to attend the meeting, Elena said. I was assigned to it. Bradley leaned against a bookshelf. You know what some people are saying? That you have some kind of special relationship with the partners. Why else would they elevate a cleaning woman with no credentials over associates with top law degrees? The accusation was so unexpected and offensive that Elena momentarily couldn't respond. Before she could gather her thoughts, another voice joined the conversation. That's an interesting theory, Wilson, and a potentially actionable one if Ms. Ramirez chose to report it to HR. Daniel Wright stood a few feet away, his expression cold as he regarded the group of associates. They straightened immediately, their confident demeanor faltering. Mr. Wright, Bradley stammered. We were just having a friendly conversation with Ms. Ramirez about the Henderson case? Were you? Daniel's tone was skeptical, because it sounded like you were implying that Ms. Ramirez's position was obtained through improper means rather than merit. That would constitute harassment under the firm's policies. Alexandra attempted to salvage the situation. We're simply concerned about maintaining the firm's professional standards. Clients expect to work with qualified attorneys. The firm's reputation is built on results, Ms. Pierce, not just credentials. Daniel replied sharply. The Henderson merger is proceeding because of Ms. Ramirez's analysis, which you and Mr. Wilson failed to develop despite your prestigious degrees. He gestured dismissively. I suggest you all find something productive to do with your time. The associates retreated quickly, leaving Elena alone with Daniel. She waited for him to leave as well, but instead he took a seat across from her. Thank you, she said quietly, though I could have handled it. I'm sure you could have, he agreed, but as a partner, I have an obligation to address inappropriate behavior when I witness it. Elena studied him curiously. I thought you opposed my hiring. I did, he admitted without hesitation. I believed it would undermine our professional standards and create problematic precedents. And now? Daniel considered the question. Now I think the situation is more complex than I initially judged it to be. Your work has been consistently excellent, and you've maintained appropriate professional boundaries. He paused. I still believe formal legal education has tremendous value, but I can acknowledge that you've demonstrated exceptional aptitude without it. Coming from Daniel Wright, who had been her most prominent skeptic, this was significant. That's unexpectedly generous, Mr. Wright. A hint of a smile crossed his face. Don't mistake my recognition of your abilities for blanket approval of your unconventional path, Ms. Ramirez. I still believe you would benefit from formal education. Actually, Elena said, I've been considering that possibility. My new position makes it financially feasible, though it would take time. Daniel looked genuinely interested. Evening programs at local law schools might be compatible with your work schedule. With your analytical abilities, you could excel. Would the firm support that path? I can't speak for the partnership as a whole, Daniel replied, but I would advocate for it. Talent should be developed, regardless of its source. As he left, Elena reflected on the unexpected turn the evening had taken. In the span of 30 minutes, she had been both demeaned by associates who resented her presence and defended by a partner who had initially opposed her hiring. The complexities of the firm continued to surprise her. The Henderson merger proceeded successfully over the following weeks, with Elena's Westmoreland strategy withstanding all challenges. As word of the upcoming deal reached the legal community, Harrington, Wells & Cohen received positive publicity for their innovative approach to the liability question. In an unexpected development, Robert Jenkins, Henderson's general counsel, specifically mentioned Elena's contribution in comments to a legal journal, noting the fresh perspective that had facilitated the merger. While he didn't mention her unconventional background, the attention further raised her profile within the firm. 6 weeks after joining Harrington, Wells & Cohen, Elena was called to a meeting with Marcus Cohen and James Harrington. She arrived promptly, curious about the purpose of the meeting, but confident in her performance thus far. Marcus greeted her warmly. Elena, thank you for coming. James and I wanted to discuss your future with the firm. A flutter of anxiety passed through her. Despite her successes, she was still acutely aware of her precarious position. Is there a problem with my work? Quite the opposite, James Harrington assured her. Your contributions have exceeded our expectations, particularly on the Henderson matter. Robert Jenkins has been singing your praises to anyone who will listen. Marcus nodded. Which brings us to the purpose of this meeting. We created your analyst position as something of an experiment, a way to utilize your talents without traditional credentials. That experiment has proven successful. I'm glad to hear that, Elena said cautiously. Would like to formalize and expand your role, Marcus continued. The title would be Senior Legal Analyst, focusing on corporate liability matters. The position would come with a salary increase and more direct client interaction, under appropriate supervision, of course. James added, we've also discussed the possibility of educational support. If you're interested in pursuing formal legal education, the firm would be willing to assist financially, with the understanding that you would continue working here throughout your studies and afterward. Elena was momentarily speechless. This was more than she had dared to hope for, not just acceptance but investment in her future. I don't know what to say. Thank you for this opportunity. You've earned it, Marcus said simply. Your work speaks for itself. There is one other matter, James added, his tone becoming more serious. We've heard some concerning reports about interactions between you and certain associates. Bradley Wilson and Alexandra Pierce in particular have been less than welcoming. Elena hesitated, not wanting to escalate the situation. There have been some challenges. It's to be expected given my unconventional background. Expected, perhaps, but not acceptable, Marcus said firmly. This firm values merit above pedigree. I'll be speaking with them directly about their behavior. That may not be necessary, Elena suggested. I think showing them I'm here on merit is more effective than intervention. James smiled approvingly. A diplomatic approach. Still, we want to be clear that you have our full support. The firm's culture needs to accommodate exceptional talent, regardless of its source or background. As the meeting concluded, Marcus had one final question. Elena, I've been curious about something. When you were cleaning our offices, how many other times did you leave notes or make suggestions on our cases? Elena felt a moment of embarrassment. Just tiny notations, occasionally. Nothing as substantial as the Henderson note. But you noticed things? Marcus pressed. Solutions or approaches we missed. She nodded reluctantly. Sometimes. I never meant to overstep. How many times? Elena thought back over her 5 years cleaning the firm's offices. Perhaps a dozen occasions where I saw something significant. Usually I just made small pencil marks to flag issues. Marcus and James exchanged a glance that spoke volumes. A dozen cases where we might have benefited from insights we never knew were available, James mused. Because we couldn't see past a cleaning uniform. The firm has always prided itself on recognizing talent, Marcus added. It seems we had a blind spot. One we're fortunate to have discovered. In the months that followed, Elena's position at Harrington, Wells and Cohen evolved from experimental to essential. Her analytical skills were increasingly sought after for complex corporate cases, and her client interactions, always supervised by partners, consistently received positive feedback. Bradley Wilson and his allies maintained their distance, but their open hostility diminished after Marcus Cohen's intervention. Others in the firm, particularly younger associates without Alexandra's sense of entitlement, began to seek Elena's insights on difficult cases. With the firm's support, Elena enrolled in evening classes at a local law school, beginning the long journey toward formal credentials that would complement her practical knowledge. The schedule was grueling, full days at the firm, followed by evening classes and late, night studying, but Elena approached it with the same determination that had characterized her self-directed learning. Daniel Wright, surprisingly, became one of her strongest supporters. He remained demanding and critical of her work, but his criticism was now constructive rather than dismissive. Occasionally, he would leave relevant case law or journal articles on her desk when complex matters arose, offering silent guidance without fanfare. One evening, as Elena was preparing to leave for her constitutional law class, Daniel stopped by her office. Ms. Ramirez, do you have a moment? She glanced at her watch. A short one. Class starts in 45 minutes. He nodded and closed the door behind him. I wanted to discuss something with you privately. A situation has arisen that I thought you should be aware of. Elena set down her bag, instantly alert. What situation? Bradley Wilson has been making inquiries about your background, specifically about your brother's case and his incarceration. Elena felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. Her brother's wrongful conviction was not something she discussed at the firm. How did he even know about that? Apparently, he hired a private investigator, Daniel said. His disgust evident. He seems to be looking for something to discredit you with. My brother was exonerated, Elena said firmly. The conviction was overturned when evidence of prosecutorial misconduct came to light. I know, Daniel assured her. I looked into the case myself when we were considering hiring you. The wrongful conviction reflects poorly on the justice system, not on your family. Elena was surprised by this revelation. You investigated me before I was hired. Of course, Daniel said matter-of-factly. I investigate everyone before supporting their employment here. Your background check was actually quite impressive. No financial improprieties, excellent work references, and a brother who was demonstrably innocent of the charges against him. Then why did you oppose hiring me? Because of the precedent it would set, not because of any personal failings, Daniel explained. But that's not relevant now. What matters is that Wilson appears to be planning some kind of attack on your credibility using your family history. Elena sighed. I have nothing to hide. My brother's case is part of what drove me to study law. Nevertheless, you should be prepared. Wilson has allies among the junior partners who were skeptical of your hirings. He may try to suggest that your understanding of law comes from the wrong side of the justice system. The implication was both offensive and absurd. That's ridiculous and desperate. It is, Daniel agreed, which suggests he feels threatened by your success. I wanted you to know so you wouldn't be blindsided if he makes an issue of it. Elena was touched by his concern. Thank you for the warning. I appreciate it. Daniel nodded and turned to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, Ms. Ramirez, I was wrong about you. Your contribution to this firm has been valuable. Credentials notwithstanding, coming from Daniel Wright, the admission was extraordinary. That means a lot, especially from you. After he left, Elena sat for a moment. Absorbing this new information, Bradley Wilson's investigation felt like a violation, stirring painful memories of her brother's ordeal. But it also represented something significant. She had become successful enough to be perceived as a threat worth undermining. In a strange way, it was validation. The invisible cleaning woman who had once moved silently through these halls, reading documents others left carelessly on their desks, had become someone whose presence mattered enough to provoke opposition. Elena gathered her books and headed to class with renewed determination. Bradley Wilson and his allies were part of a world that had always excluded people like her, people without the right background, education, or connections. They were fighting to maintain that exclusivity, to protect their privileged position. But the legal world was changing slowly and unevenly. Firms like Harrington's, Wells and Cohen were beginning to recognize that talent and insight could come from unexpected sources. Elena's presence was part of that change, a small crack in a system that had long been closed to outsiders. As she rode the subway to her evening class, Elena thought about how far she had come from the night she had first dared to leave a note on Marcus Cohen's desk. The journey had been neither easy nor straightforward, and there were still challenges ahead: law school to complete, bar exams to pass, and professional credibility to establish beyond a single firm. But for the first time, the path forward was clear. The cleaning woman who had once been invisible to the attorneys she served had found her place in their world, not by conforming to their expectations but by demonstrating that true legal insight could come from the most unexpected sources. The system that had once excluded her was slowly being transformed by her presence within it, and that, Elena reflected as she opened her constitutional law textbook, was perhaps the most significant legal precedent of all. The following week, Elena arrived at the firm to find an unusual level of activity for early morning. Associates and partners were gathered in small clusters, conversations stopping abruptly as she passed. Jennifer intercepted her at her office door. "Elena, Cohen wants to see you immediately. Partners conference room." Something in Jennifer's tone set off warning bells. "What's happening?" Jennifer glanced around before lowering her voice. "Bradley Wilson made some kind of formal complaint to the ethics committee last night. Something about your brother and misrepresentation of your background. It's all anyone's talking about this morning." So Daniel's warning had been present. "Thank you for telling me." The partners' conference room was on the 48th floor, a space Elena had only seen during her cleaning days. As she entered, she found Marcus Cohen, James Harrington, and Sophia Chen already seated, along with 3 other senior partners she knew only by reputation. Daniel Wright stood by the window, his expression unreadable. "Elena Ramirez." Marcus greeted her formally. "Please have a seat. We need to discuss a serious matter." Elena sat, keeping her expression composed despite her internal anxiety. "I understand Bradley Wilson has filed a complaint about me." James Harrington nodded. "He has raised concerns about potential misrepresentation in your hiring. Specifically, he claims you failed to disclose your brother's criminal history and that your legal knowledge derives from—" He paused, clearly uncomfortable. "Inappropriate sources. My brother was wrongfully convicted," Elena said firmly. "He was fully exonerated 7 years later when evidence of prosecutorial misconduct came to light, and my legal knowledge comes from independent study of proper legal texts and case law, as I've always maintained." Sophia leaned forward. "We know that, Elena. No one in this room believes Wilson's implications. But as a firm, we have procedures for addressing formal ethics complaints." One of the other partners, Richard Baker, head of the ethics committee, cleared his throat. "The specific allegation is that you misrepresented yourself during the hiring process by omitting your family's history with the legal system, which Mr. Wilson claims constitutes a material omission that might have affected hiring decisions." Elena felt a flash of indignation. "I was never asked about my family's legal history during the hiring process. There was no misrepresentation. Furthermore," Richard continued, "Mr. Wilson suggests that your lack of formal credentials combined with your sudden expertise raises questions about the sources of your legal knowledge. He's implying I learned law through criminal associations," Elena said flatly. "That's not just false, it's offensive." Marcus raised a hand. "We understand your frustration, Ms. Ramirez. These allegations are serious but, in our view, without merit. However, they've been formally filed with the Ethics Committee, so we must address them properly." Daniel finally spoke from his position by the window. "Wilson has also been speaking to certain clients, suggesting that the firm is compromising its standards by employing non-credentialed staff in quasi-legal roles. This was even more concerning. His client relationships were the lifeblood of the firm. Has anyone expressed concerns?" "Not yet," Sophia said, "but the potential for reputational damage exists." James Harrington, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. Elena Ramirez, I've been practicing law for over 40 years. In that time, I've learned that attacks like this are rarely about the stated concerns. Mr. Wilson isn't truly worried about ethics or disclosure. He's threatened by your success and seeking to undermine it. The question, Marcus added, is how we respond. The ethics committee will investigate and dismiss these baseless allegations, but that process takes time. In the interim, we need to consider how to address the potential client concerns Wilson is attempting to stir up. Elena took a deep breath, organizing her thoughts. May I suggest an approach? The partners looked at her with varying degrees of interest and skepticism. Instead of hiding from these allegations or treating them as a crisis, we could use them as an opportunity. My background is unconventional, yes, but my work speaks for itself. The Henderson merger succeeded largely because of an approach traditional legal education hadn't considered. She continued with growing confidence. What if we positioned my role explicitly as complementary to traditional legal expertise, not replacing credentialed attorneys but enhancing their work with alternative perspectives? Sophia nodded slowly. Frame it as a strength rather than a liability. An innovative approach to complex legal challenges. Exactly, Elena agreed. And regarding Wilson's allegations about my brother, that's a story of the legal system failing and then correcting itself. I studied law initially to help an innocent man. That's not something to hide, it demonstrates a deep commitment to justice. Marcus exchanged glances with James. It's an unconventional approach to an ethics complaint. Typically, the firm would maintain a low profile during the investigation. With respect, sir, Elena said, this isn't a typical situation. And hiding plays into Wilson's narrative that there's something questionable about my background. Daniel pushed away from the window. She's right. Defense looks like guilt. Better to control the narrative than let Wilson define it. After further discussion, the partners agreed to Elena's approach. The firm would openly acknowledge her unconventional path while emphasizing the value her perspective brought to complex legal matters. Her brother's wrongful conviction would be presented as the catalyst for her legal studies, underscoring her commitment to justice rather than hiding it as a liability. As the meeting concluded, Richard Baker approached Elena. Elena Ramirez, for the record, I believe these allegations are without merit, but procedure requires a formal investigation. I'll need to interview you regarding the specific claims. I understand, Elena assured him. I have nothing to hide. Outside the conference room, Daniel fell into step beside her. That was well handled. Most people become defensive when attacked. Defense implies there's something to defend, Elena replied. I've done nothing wrong. Daniel studied her for a moment. You know, when I first opposed your hiring, it wasn't just about credentials. I believe that legal education teaches a way of thinking that can't be self-taught. And now? Elena asked. A hint of a smile crossed his face. Now I think perhaps I was the one with the limited perspective. Legal education teaches one way of thinking. But there are others that can be equally valuable in the right context. Over the next 2 weeks, the Ethics Committee conducted its investigation with thorough professionalism. Elena provided a complete account of her background, including detailed information about her brother's wrongful conviction and exoneration. She also outlined her self-education process, producing notebooks, annotated textbooks, and records of her legal research dating back 15 years. Meanwhile, Marcus Cohen personally contacted the firm's major clients, including William Henderson, to address any concerns Bradley Wilson might have raised. Far from being troubled by Elena's unconventional background, most clients were intrigued by the firm's innovative approach to talent development. William Henderson, in particular, was supportive. I don't care if she learned law from reading fortune cookies, he told Marcus bluntly. Her analysis saved my merger. Results matter more than pedigree. Bradley Wilson, apparently expecting the firm to quietly sideline Elena during the investigation, seemed taken aback by the open approach. His allies grew noticeably less vocal as it became clear that the senior partners were firmly supporting Elena despite the ethics complaint. The Ethics Committee issued its findings 3 weeks after the complaint was filed. Elena was called to a meeting with Richard Baker to hear the results. Elena Ramirez, he began formally. The committee has completed its investigation of the allegations made by Mr. Wilson. We have found no evidence of misrepresentation during your hiring process. Your background was properly disclosed to the extent it was relevant, and your brother's wrongful conviction raises no ethical concerns regarding your employment here. Elena felt a profound sense of relief, though she had been confident of this outcome. Thank you, Mr. Baker. Furthermore, he continued, the committee finds the insinuation that your legal knowledge derives from improper sources to be wholly without merit and potentially defamatory. We will be addressing this aspect of the complaint with Mr. Wilson separately. That was unexpected. What does that mean? Richard's expression was grim. It means Mr. Wilson's attempt to damage your reputation has backfired rather severely. The partnership will be considering disciplinary action for filing a groundless ethics complaint with malicious intent. 2 days later, Elena was working late when Sophia Chen appeared at her office door. Do you have a minute? Of course. Elena set aside the case she was reviewing. Something wrong. Sophia closed the door before taking a seat. Not wrong, exactly. I thought you should hear this from me rather than through office gossip. Bradley Wilson has been asked to leave the firm. Elena was stunned. Because of the complaint against me. That was the final straw, but not the only factor, Sophia explained. The ethics investigation revealed some troubling patterns. He had been keeping files on several colleagues he viewed as competitors, looking for ways to undermine them. And he misrepresented billable hours on at least 2 client matters. I never wanted this, Elena said, genuinely disturbed. I would have been satisfied with the complaint being dismissed. This isn't your doing, Sophia assured her. Wilson created this situation himself. The firm can tolerate many things, but ethical violations and sabotaging colleagues cross a line. After Sophia left, Elena sat quietly, processing this unexpected development. Bradley Wilson's attempt to discredit her had led to his own downfall. There was a certain poetic justice to it, though she took no pleasure in anyone's career derailment, even someone who had treated her with contempt. More significant was what the outcome represented. The firm had chosen to stand behind her, not just tolerating her presence, but actively defending it against challenge. Her value had been affirmed not as a novelty or experiment, but as an essential contributor to the firm's success. The invisible cleaning woman who had once moved through these offices unnoticed had become someone worth fighting for. 6 months later, Elena sat in constitutional law SU, taking careful notes as Professor Martinez discussed the nuances of First Amendment jurisprudence. Her first semester of law school had been challenging but deeply satisfying, confirming that her self-directed studies had built a solid foundation while expanding her understanding in new directions. The class ended, and Elena gathered her materials, preparing for the subway ride back to her apartment. Law school 3 evenings a week while maintaining her position at the firm made for grueling days, but the firm had been accommodating, adjusting her schedule to make the dual commitments manageable. As she left the classroom, she was surprised to see Daniel Wright waiting in the hallway, looking somewhat out of place among the evening students in their casual clothes. Mr. Wright, she said, unable to hide her surprise. What are you doing here? Ms. Ramirez. He greeted her with a nod. I was meeting with the dean about the firm's scholarship program. I thought I might catch you after your class. He glanced at the students streaming past them. Is there somewhere we could talk? They found a quiet corner in the law school's atrium. Daniel seemed uncharacteristically hesitant, adjusting his tie before speaking. The Henderson merger closed successfully yesterday, he said finally. The liability approach you developed was cited by their counsel as a key factor in overcoming the regulatory hurdles. That's excellent news, Elena replied, still puzzled by his presence. This update could have waited until tomorrow at the office. Yes, well, Daniel cleared his throat. I wanted to tell you personally because it represents a significant validation of your approach. The firm is implementing a formal program to identify unconventional talent in other areas of practice based largely on your success. Elena was genuinely touched. I'm glad something positive has come from my experience. There's more? Daniel continued. The partners have voted to create a new position, Director of Alternative Legal Analysis. The role would involve overseeing analysis from non-traditional perspectives across practice areas and developing methodologies for integrating those insights with conventional legal approaches. That sounds fascinating, Elena said sincerely. Who will be taking on the position? Daniel looked at her directly. Would like you to consider it. The role would come with the title of non-attorney officer of the firm and significant compensation adjustments. You would report directly to the executive committee. Elena was momentarily speechless. But I'm still in my first year of law school. I won't have credentials for years. The position doesn't require a JD, Daniel explains. It's specifically designed for someone with your unique combination of analytical abilities and unconventional perspective. Your law school progress would be an asset but not a requirement. I don't know what to say, Elena admitted. This is unexpected. Take some time to consider it, Daniel suggested. The formal offer will be presented next week. He hesitated, then added, for what it's worth, I advocated for this position specifically with you in mind. Your work has demonstrated that there's value in approaches that lie outside traditional legal education. Coming from Daniel Wright, who had initially been her strongest skeptic, this was extraordinary. Thank you. That means a great deal. As Daniel turned to leave, he paused. One more thing, Ms. Ramirez. I owe you an apology for my initial opposition to your hiring. I allowed preconceptions about credentials to cloud my judgment of your abilities. It was a form of bias I didn't recognize in myself until confronted with evidence I couldn't ignore. Elena was touched by his candor. We all have biases, Mr. Wright. What matters is being willing to reconsider them when presented with new information. Indeed, a rare smile crossed his face. Perhaps that's something they should teach in law school. 2 years later, Elena stood at the window of her corner office on the 47th floor of Harrington, Wells & Cohen. The New York skyline stretched before her, glittering in the early evening light. On her desk, case files awaited her attention, complex legal matters from across the firm's practice areas, sent to her department for alternative analysis. As Director of Alternative Legal Analysis, Elena now led a team of 6 analysts, each bringing unconventional perspectives to the firm's work. Some, like her, came from non-traditional backgrounds. Others had conventional legal education but demonstrated innovative thinking that traditional practice hadn't fully utilized. The program had proven so successful that other firms were beginning to develop similar initiatives. Recognizing that diversity of thought, not just demographic diversity, strengthened legal analysis in complex cases. Elena's own journey through law school continued, though at a measured pace that accommodated her professional responsibilities. She had completed 2 years of evening classes with distinguished grades, her practical experience providing context that enhanced her understanding of theoretical concepts. A knock at her door interrupted her reflection. Jennifer, now her administrative assistant rather than just Marcus Cohen's, entered with a smile. "The new analyst is here for her interview," she announced. "Should I show her in?" Elena nodded, moving from the window to her desk. "Yes, please." A moment later, a young woman entered mid-20s, dressed in a simple but professional outfit that suggested limited resources carefully allocated. She carried a worn portfolio and stood with the slightly hesitant posture of someone entering unfamiliar territory. "Ms. Diaz." Elena extended her hand. "I'm Elena Ramirez. Please, have a seat." Maria Diaz shook her hand firmly despite her obvious nervousness. "Thank you for seeing me, Ms. Ramirez. I appreciate the opportunity. Your application was quite interesting," Elena said, referring to notes on her desk. "No formal legal education, but you've been working as a paralegal at a community legal aid office while studying independently." "Yes, Mom," Maria confirmed. "I couldn't afford law school, but I've been learning through practical experience and self-study for the past 4 years." Elena smiled reassuringly. "Tell me about your analysis of tenant rights in gentrifying neighborhoods. Your approach in the East Side housing case was particularly innovative." As Maria began explaining her work, Elena observed the young woman's growing confidence when discussing legal concepts. There was a familiar passion in her voice, the same drive for justice that had fueled Elena's own journey through legal complexities without the benefit of formal guidance. The interview continued for nearly an hour, with Elena posing increasingly complex hypotheticals to assess Maria's analytical abilities. By the end, she was impressed by the young woman's combination of practical knowledge and theoretical understanding. "Ms. Diaz, I think you could be a valuable addition to our team," Elena said finally. "The position involves analyzing complex cases from non-traditional perspectives, identifying approaches conventional legal education might overlook." Maria's eyes widened. "You're offering me the job, even without a law degree." This department was created specifically to incorporate insights from beyond traditional legal training, Elena explained. "Your experience at legal aid has given you practical understanding that many law graduates lack, and your self-directed studies demonstrate both intellectual capacity and personal initiative." "I don't know what to say," Maria admitted. "I never imagined a firm like this would consider someone with my background." Elena smiled, remembering her own disbelief when Marcus Cohen had first offered her a position. "Things are changing in the legal profession, Ms. Diaz. Slowly perhaps, but changing nonetheless. Firms are beginning to recognize that valuable insights can come from unexpected sources." As she outlined the position's responsibilities and benefits, including tuition assistance, should Maria wish to pursue formal education, Elena felt a sense of completion. The cycle that had begun with her own unconventional entry into the legal world was continuing, creating opportunities for others whose talents might otherwise have remained unrecognized. Later that evening, after completing her day's work, Elena packed her briefcase for her constitutional law final exam. As she prepared to leave, she paused at her office window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, night cleaning crews were beginning their shifts, moving through offices like these, largely invisible to the professionals whose spaces they maintained. Elena wondered how many of them harbored talents and capacities that remained untapped, How many minds capable of extraordinary contributions were overlooked because of circumstances or appearances or lack of formal credentials? The legal profession's traditional paths excluded far more potential than they included, filtering for privilege as much as for abilities. Her department was just one small initiative in one firm, but it represented something significant, an acknowledgement that excellence could emerge from unexpected sources, that the standard metrics of potential were inherently limited, and that true talent deserved recognition regardless of its origin. As Elena headed to her exam, she carried that awareness with her, the understanding that systems could change when confronted with evidence they couldn't ignore, that invisible contributions could become visible when given the opportunity, and that true justice required expanding access rather than restricting it. The cleaning woman who had once left quiet notes in the margins of legal documents was now helping to rewrite the profession's understanding of where legal insight could be found. And that's, Elena reflected as she walked through the firm's elegant reception area toward the elevators, was perhaps the most meaningful case she had ever worked on. The story of Elena Ramirez spread gradually through legal circles, first as a curiosity, then as a case study discussed at conferences on legal innovation and talent development. Other firms began implementing their own versions of alternative analysis departments, seeking out individuals with unconventional backgrounds but demonstrable analytical abilities. Law schools, too, began reconsidering their admissions criteria, creating pathways for exceptional candidates who lacked traditional backgrounds but showed remarkable aptitude. Elena herself was occasionally invited to speak at these institutions, sharing her journey from cleaning offices to directing legal analysis at a prestigious firm. 4 years after first stepping into Harrington, Wells & Cohen as a professional rather than a cleaner, Elena stood at a podium in the firm's largest conference room. Behind her, a banner announced the formal launch of the Elena Ramirez Scholarship Program, an initiative providing financial support and mentorship to promising individuals from non-traditional backgrounds seeking legal educations. The room was filled with firm personnel, scholarship recipients, and representatives from law schools partnering with the program. Among them, Elena spotted familiar faces: Marcus Cohen, now semi-retired but still influential; Sophia Chen, recently elevated to managing partner; Daniel Wright, whose initial skepticism had evolved into staunch advocacy for alternative pathways in legal education. The law, Elena began, addressing the gathered crowd, is fundamentally about justice and equity. Yet the pathways to legal careers have traditionally been anything but equitable. She continued with growing confidence, outlining the barriers that prevented many talented individuals from pursuing legal education: financial constraints, family responsibilities, lack of connections to the profession. The scholarship program aimed to address these barriers, providing not just financial assistance but mentorship, flexible study options, and guaranteed internships. "When I first entered this building as a professional rather than a cleaner," Elena said, approaching the conclusion of her remarks, "I was reminded every day of how unlikely my presence was. Now, I hope the recipients of this scholarship will find their presence in legal settings increasingly unremarkable, not because their journeys aren't extraordinary, but because pathways like theirs have become recognized as valid and valuable." As she finished speaking, the room erupted in applause. The first cohort of scholarship recipients, 5 individuals from diverse backgrounds who had demonstrated exceptional analytical abilities through non-traditional channels, were introduced and welcomed. Among them was Maria Diaz, now completing her 2nd year at law school while continuing to work in Elena's department. She had proven to be an exceptional analyst, her perspectives shaped by years of working directly with underserved communities at Legal Aid. After the formal program concluded, Elena found herself approached by a familiar face: William Henderson, whose merger had been her first major contribution to the firm. "Ms. Ramirez." He greeted her warmly. "Or should I say Professor Ramirez, given your new adjunct position at the law school?" Elena smiled. "Elena is fine, Mr. Henderson. The teaching position is just 1 evening a week. Teaching alternative pathways to legal analysis, I understand." He nodded approvingly. "Quite a journey from analyzing my merger liability issues 4 years ago. The merger that launched a career," she acknowledged. "I'm grateful for the opportunity it provided." William Henderson shook his head slightly. "Opportunity doesn't quite capture it. You created your own opening through insight and courage. Not many people would have left that note on a managing partner's desk." "It was a risk," Elena admitted. "The best innovations usually are," he replied. "Your program here is making waves, you know. My daughter is on the admissions committee at Columbia Law. She tells me they're reevaluating their entire approach to identifying potential, partly because of graduates from your department who are outperforming traditionally credentialed students." This was news to Elena. I hadn't heard that. Change happens slowly in institutions like law schools, William said, but it does happen, especially when the evidence becomes impossible to ignore. As the reception continued around them, Elena reflected on the changes she had witnessed and participated in over the past 4 years. The legal profession remained largely traditional in its pathways and perspectives, but cracks had appeared in its exclusionary structure, small openings through which new talent and fresh viewpoints were beginning to emerge. Her own journey from invisible cleaner to respected legal professional was just one story, but it represented a challenge to entrenched assumptions about where legal insight could be found and who deserved a place at the table. The scholarship program would create more such stories, each one further demonstrating that potential existed far beyond the profession's traditional boundaries. Later that evening, as the reception wound down, Elena found herself alone with Daniel Wright, who had been instrumental in designing the scholarship program despite his initial skepticism about unconventional pathways. Successful launch, he commented, nodding toward the dispersing crowd. The firm's getting positive press already. It's not about press, Elena replied. It's about opening doors that have been closed for too long. Daniel smiled slightly, always the idealist. Though I suppose your idealism has proven more practical than my pragmatism in some respects. He paused, then added, 4 years ago, I would have said what you've accomplished was impossible. I'm glad to have been proven wrong. The system is changing, Elena acknowledged, but slowly. There are still so many barriers. True, Daniel agreed. But systems don't change through revolution as often as through demonstration. Each success story like yours makes the next one more plausible, until eventually, the exceptional becomes expected. As they stood together, looking out at the New York skyline from the conference room windows, Elena thought about the cleaning crews currently moving through buildings across the city, anonymous figures maintaining spaces while remaining largely unseen by those who occupied them during daylight hours. How many of those invisible workers had untapped abilities that might transform fields and professions if given the chance? How many insights and innovations remained unrealized because opportunity was distributed by privilege rather than potential? The scholarship program couldn't address all those inequities, but it created a small opening in a system that had long been closed, a recognition that talent existed beyond traditional pathways and deserved cultivation regardless of its source. For Elena Ramirez, who had once left quiet annotations on legal documents while emptying trash cans after attorneys had gone home, that represented the most meaningful victory of all, not just personal success, but the creation of pathways for others whose abilities might otherwise remain invisible. As she gathered her materials to leave, Elena paused at the door, looking back at the banner announcing the scholarship program that bore her name. The cleaning woman who had once been unseen in these hallways had become not just visible but influential, her journey now creating possibilities for others to follow. It was, she reflected as she stepped into the elevator, a case that truly embodied the principles of justice she had first sought to understand 15 years earlier, not in a courtroom verdict, but in the gradual transformation of a system to recognize worth and potential wherever they might be found. The doors closed, and Elena descended toward the lobby, leaving behind the conference room where her name now represented not just her own unlikely journey, but a pathway for others whose talents had yet to be discovered. The invisible had become visible, and in doing so, had begun to change what others could see as well.